4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, hello, hello. Well, it must be Thursday because once again, we are here with Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Lunch Break Live. That's J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live, which happens every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. This is our time to have a little bit of a chit chat about hot topics in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we know, unfortunately, this very important workplace culture practice is under attack, not only in our workplaces, but in our schools and even in the way that we govern. But this space is going to focus on the workplace pieces specifically. Although, if those of you who really know me know, I will have a tendency to dwell off into some other areas from time to time. But if you have been a frequent listener of ours, and we hope that you have been, then you will know that we are in the middle of talking about implementing equity plans. And so just to give a quick recap, when we talk about implementing equity plans, there are really 4 kind of cycles that you should be familiar with. And I purposely use the word cycle because this process is a journey that never ends. The good thing is, and the payoff is, along the way, you continue to improve and get better at your workplace culture and having inclusive practices that I promise you lead to a highly efficient, productive team environment. Okay. So, what are those cycles? The cycles of implementing inclusion and equity plans include a planning cycle, an implementation cycle, a monitoring and evaluation cycle, and sustainability and scalability cycle. All 4 of those big cycles are important. And what we will be doing over the next many weeks is working through different components within those cycles. We've just gotten started. And as you can see, this is part 2. So within the planning cycle itself, there are 5 key areas that you want to be paying attention to. The first is you want to start with having an equity assessment. And I mentioned this is a cycle. So you should really be looking at conducting some type of assessment on an annual basis. This can take several forms, including formal or informal feedback that you get through a review process or exit interviews or through the hiring process. It can also include an annual workplace survey assessment, which could look at, that should include equity issues. This is like employee satisfaction kinds of things. But you also want to think about how this is impacting impacting your clients or your customers or your other stakeholders. So you may also look at opportunities to create assessments and measurements with your stakeholders. But if you want to know more, you got to go look at the video from last week, which is available on our YouTube channel, because this week we're going to be talking about number 2, which is setting clear objectives. And just for context, within the planning cycle, there are 5 key areas that we want you to be particularly intentional about. One is conducting that equity assessment. The second is setting clear objectives, which we're going to delve into today. The third is involving stakeholders, which will be next week's topic. That's a really important one. So if you have friends, you may want to tag them in. And then number 4 would be securing funding and resources. And we're going to talk about not just the fact that funding and resources represents a commitment, but that it's actually something that shows a level of trust and investment. And then finally, hey, I wouldn't be the attorney that I am if we didn't talk about the legal review. All right, let's dig into today. Today, we really want to talk about setting clear objectives. And, I have to admit, I struggle with whether or not I should talk about clear objectives first or talk about the assessment first. But I decided to make this kind of the second area, and it's because it really helps to kind of guide this whole process. And so the second area around clear objectives, really what you want to do is the key here is you want to make sure that you're not just doing this as a check the box exercise. And trust me, I know if you have ever talked to any DEI consultant or DEI professional, I suspect for most of us, it's certainly true with me, that one of our number one pet peeves is having to engage in quote unquote check the box exercises. And that denotes that we're doing it, but it doesn't really fit into what we do as a company, as an organization, as an institution. We're just doing it to say that we did it, and hopefully, maybe we gain some goodwill for it. Well, spoiler alert, that does not work. So, how do you make the investment that you are choosing to make in equity and inclusion really meaningful to workplace culture? Well, the key way is to set clear objectives that connect to your mission and goals that are both measurable and time bound. And what that looks like can be very different for different places, but you want to be clear about what you seek to achieve. Let's walk through a quick example. Let's say you are a advocacy organization and you are focused on advocating for gun safety. And the mission of your organization is to educate young people about the importance of gun safety and acknowledging and being advocates for their own community. Okay, that's your big overall organizational objectives. Now, why would inclusion, equity, and diversity be something that's important to you? You need to be able to answer that question. And in the answer to that question, you build your objectives. So, one reason may be that we see that a large number of minority communities are impacted by gun violence. And so, because of the impact of gun violence, we see them as a key constituency to helping us move this advocacy message. And so, having their voice at the table is important to us. In order to make sure that they are authentically represented, we want to make sure that our staff is culturally competent in how to do outreach to that community. Further, we want to make sure that because we recognize that gun violence touches multiple communities and multiple levels of identity, we want to make sure that we have cultural competency across the board, not only in the way that we are dealing with our stakeholders, but also in the way that we are developing our work. And so the best way to do that is to be intentional about how those competencies play out in our work. And so you can set objectives around that. So you can set staffing objectives and say, we want to make sure that our staffing represents our constituency. You don't have to have a hard goal necessarily, but you may start tracking whether or not it is actually matching your constituency. And you can look at, well, who are we serving? And who do we want to serve? And do we have folks that represent those perspectives within our organization? That's certainly a clear objective. You can also, and maybe you want to say that you want to have an improvement in that within a year, within 2 years, recognizing that this can look a bunch of different ways. You may also want to be more intentional about your programming. So you may set an objective to have representation in your workshops, in your big conference events, in your fundraising. All of these represents ways in which you can set clear objectives. Why is this important? Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. First, you want to make sure that you're able to connect why you are investing in inclusion to your work so that it helps your workforce understand why it is important to them. I often talk about when you are moving a DEI plan that it's leadership's job. I liken it to building a house, and it's leadership's job to lay the foundation and construct the framing of the house. But it is your team's job to make sure that the walls go up and that the rooms get put together and decorated, because that's where they work and live and control those spaces. And they need to understand that their part in terms of putting up the walls and decorating the rooms are just as important as the leadership's part, who is setting the framework and laying the foundation. All right, next week, we're going to talk about how to involve your stakeholders, how to get them engaged in the planning process. We should think about stakeholders in the widest possible way. And again, by connecting them to clear objectives, this allows us, if you haven't previously been implementing equity plans, this allows you to think about structurally how you might start to transition to involve different stakeholders at different times until you get everybody on board. All right, you don't want to miss next week. It's going to be probably next to the legal, I would say, one of the more impactful places to be thinking about. Remember, we're in planning cycle. We've just completed the second area that you need to think about in planning cycle. We've got 3 more to go before we go on to implementation. Well, that's been J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live. I'm your J.E.D.I Master, Holly Holiday. I will be back with you again live. My phone is binging. I'll be back again with you live next week, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. In the meantime, if you are enjoying this content, we hope that you will like, share, and follow us on our social media channels. If you have questions that I can answer, feel free to email us at J.E.D.I at Sisters Lead Sisters. I'm sorry, that's the wrong email address. Email us at J.E.D.I at holidayadvisors.com, and we will try our best to answer the question and provide you with more information. If that's not enough for you and you just really want a deeper dive, you can always reach out to us on our website at holidayadvisors.com and schedule time to talk to me directly. I think that's it. I appreciate you and thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful Thursday. We'll see you next week. Did you enjoy this segment of J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live? I'll be back next Thursday. Come on back and bring a friend.